Everyone, welcome into another edition of To The Point podcast. You guys doing well after a wild weekend, and it's only been 24 hours since I spoke to you all yesterday, talking a lot of college football, talked about some hockey on Saturday evening, some basketball as well, including DeMar DeRozan and some interesting things. But, 24 hours can be an eternity in the world of sports, because not only did we get a full slate of NFL Sunday, where we got a lot of games, a lot of division games that came down to the wire. And you saw a Cincinnati team get blown out against the Chargers at home. We have a game tonight between the Bills and Patriots that is sure to be an instant classic on Monday Night Football. But more than that, we saw a comeback from the ages at the Hero World Challenge in the Bahamas, where Victor Hovland came back from 6 strokes down heading into the final round to beat two-time major champion Colin Morikawa. We saw a Toronto Maple Leaf game that had some physicality, that may have multiple suspensions, a missed call, 2 coaches that seem to not really like each other. More than that, 2 coaches fired since I last talked to you. GM gone. The hockey world is on its axis right now, and coaches are going out the wazoo. We're going to talk about it today. We're also going to talk some football, of course, but I'm going to lead with hockey today. I know I usually lead with football after Sunday, but I think it's important to start with hockey because the Vancouver Canucks have been in turmoil for some time. You can make the argument, since Jim Benning was hired over 7 years ago, that the Vancouver Canucks have never really been on the map. They've been on a team that's done the worst thing that you can do in pro sports, in my opinion, and that's being mediocre. Living in mediocrity is the worst thing you can do. It's either compete for championships or bottom out. Being in the middle, being middle of the pack, year after year after year is a terrible place to be, because more often than not, you're not going to get a good draft pick. You're not going to get that much better. And you're just outside the playoffs year after year, or you make it and you lose in the first round. Well, in the bubble 2 years ago, the Vancouver Canucks had an unbelievable run where Jacob Markstrom and Thatcher Demko had a .960 save percentage. And they made it to game 7 of the second round. They battled hard. They nearly got through. But we know now, we knew then, that was a mirage. We didn't have hockey from March until August. Teams were on hold. Pittsburgh lost to Montreal. Columbus beat Toronto. It was a weird time. And Vancouver had this positive mojo. Quinn Hughes, the rookie sensation. Bo Horvat, the great captain. We have Jacob Markstrom as an amazing goaltender heading into free agency. And there was positive vibes. And the outgoing thought was Vancouver is the best team in Canada. Now, if you listen to me last year, this is where I am right and I'm wrong. Last year, I thought the Vancouver Canucks would be a terrible hockey team. And I was right. They didn't do anything well. Jacob Markstrom left. Thatcher Demko gave them everything they had. But ultimately, he ran out of gas, and the team had a flat tire. JT Miller, you could argue, gave up on the team last year. His attitude was porous. Their defense core continues to get worse and worse. Travis Hamonic, Tyler Myers. It's big, it's slow, and that's not how the game works today. And they also had terrible contracts, like Louis Eriksson, who they signed to a 7-year deal a number of years ago. They had Antoine Roussel and Jay Beagle, and just name after name of players that provide nothing and cost too much. And I thought coming into this season, Jim Benning, or as I like to refer him as, Jet Black, if you look at his hair, he did some good things. I thought acquiring Oliver Ekman-Larsson was a positive move because he got rid of terrible contracts. It was not going to be easy to get rid of Louis Eriksson, to get rid of Jay Beagle. Now, looking back on it, you could have sat there and ate the contracts for this year. You could have bought them out, and you could be in the exact same position that they're in right now. That is absolutely the truth. And maybe that was the right decision, and it probably is looking back. But I like Connor Garland. He's a piece that I would want on my team. I can't believe I'm saying that because I watched him play so many junior games in Moncton, and I couldn't stand the guy. But he's morphed his game, and I give him credit for that. And he could be on my team any day of the week. But you still look at the foundation of this team. Goaltending, it hasn't been strong this year. But I say this, and I truly mean it. You can have great forwards. You can have goal scorers. It's important to have. But if you do not have a strong defense core, you cannot win. You can look through the teams that have won Stanley Cups in the last decade. They all have a number one defenseman. Chris Letang was a number one defenseman. Victor Hedman ×2. Drew Doughty. Duncan Keith. You go through the list of teams that have won. Alex Pietrangelo. Teams have a number one defenseman. Is Ryan O'Reilly a superstar? No. Is Anze Kopitar better than Austin Matthews or better than Sidney Crosby? No. But having that pillar on the back end is so important. And having a strong defense core, having guys like Brent Seabrook, having guys like Matt Green, like Alec Martinez, who play good hockey and show up in the big moments. Vancouver's defense core is atrocious. And I look at this team. Ekman Larsson has been, since getting his 7-year deal worth over $7 million a year, he's been a disappointment. I'm not going to deny that. He's 30 years old. He's got 5 points this season. That's not enough. It's not even close to good enough. This guy should be a 40 to 50 point defenseman. You've got to have more from him. And there's not much else to say. He's got to be better. Travis Hamonic. Travis Hamonic's got a tough story with his kids. I know they got something, health-wise. I'm not touching on that subject. This is just on play. I could give a crap about what happens at home. Not in a bad way, just this is brass tacks. This is hockey. Travis Hamonic is washed. I don't like saying that, but he's slow. I heard forever Eric Goodbranson couldn't play in the NHL anymore. Eric Goodbranson is not the fastest guy. He's a better defenseman than Travis Hamonic. And multiple years ago, people would have thrown a phone book at me because I'm so crazy. Travis Hamonic has no foot speed. He's missed multiple seasons, so he's not in shape, in my opinion. And he's just not the guy he was in Long Island. He was another bad signing. Going down the list here. Quinn Hughes, I like Quinn Hughes. I wish he wasn't 180 pounds. I wish he wasn't 5'10". And I don't love that type of defenseman. I mentioned Sammy Girard. I think he's a flat-out liability when you get to the playoffs. Cale Makar is not as effective in the playoffs as he is in the regular season. But Quinn Hughes is a defenseman I would want on my team because if you can put him with the right guy when it comes to a defense pairing, you should be in good shape. If they had Chris Tanev like he did on his rookie season, when he was a phenom, that looks pretty good. And if you watch Calgary this year, Chris Tanev is having a bounce back season. He's playing some really good hockey in Calgary. Tyler Myers. Tyler Myers is, he was a 12th overall pick in 2008. That's a while ago. He's now 31. You see all the defensemen are, Quinn Hughes is 22. Everyone I've named so far is 30 plus. Tyler Myers is just, what angers me about Tyler Myers on defense is like James Van Riemsdyk to me playing forward. He's a guy he's 6'8". He's a huge man, but he doesn't use his physicality enough. He's 6'8", 230 pounds. Wear people down. Make it tough to go to the front of the net. But too often, Tyler Myers just lets people go by him. He's not the fleetest of foot. And Winnipeg letting him go was a smart decision because when guys like Tyler Myers, who are pretty good but not elite, hit the market, they make elite defenseman money. And it's stupid organizations like the Vancouver Canucks that give these bad contracts. And then they're stuck in this pit of despair for years and years. Tyler Myers, 6 points in 25 games. It's not all about points. I'm not all about points when it comes to defensemen, but he's not good defensively. Again, if he had some girth, yes, the game isn't bite kneecaps off like it was 30 years ago, but you can still show some fucking passion. He doesn't. Tucker Poolman. He's the same. Tyler Myers, Tucker Poolman, and Travis Hamonic are pretty much all the same guy. I like Poolman the most out of the three, but Poolman's a fifth defenseman. That's what he was in Winnipeg. He was effective-ish, even though Winnipeg their defense is a big reason why they never win anything in the playoffs. But you look at Hamonic, Myers, Poolman, and Luke Schenn, they're all the same. Hamonic and Schenn both really are fringe NHLers, in my opinion. Schenn can play the role of a sixth defenseman, the seventh guy coming in. I don't want him playing every night. Good story winning cups in Tampa, but there was a reason he was in the press box for most of those playoff games. Spot duty, he's good. I don't want him playing every night. And especially not when you have 3 to 4 guys that have the same makeup as him. You want some diversity. You look at their back end. Quinn Hughes is the only guy that brings something offensive that can make a play. You look at Colorado, Bowen Byram, Cale Makar. In Toronto, Morgan Riley, Rasmus Sandin. These defensemen can move into the play. It cannot just be one guy that is offensively creative. Defensemen nowadays, I still hate some of them in the way they're coached when it comes to defensive play. I think it's gotten worse and worse over the years. But at the same time, you need to provide something. You cannot just be a statue. At least be a good puck-moving defenseman out of the zone. Don't get hemmed. You see that too often. And Thatcher Demko, I really like. And that I mentioned, he's 25. He's got a .908 save percentage and .297 goals against it. That's no good. But he's also, I just mentioned his defense core. I look at this roster. Brock Besser is a frustrating player to me because he's great when he's shooting the puck. Otherwise, he's really not that effective. He's terrible in his own zone. He's a lazy winger and kind of entitled, if you ask me. Garland, I like. I mentioned that. Garland is he's got 18 points in 25 games. That's about where you expect him to be, and he's gonna chip in. He's gonna give you everything he has. No complaints from him. Nils Hoglander, he's a third line guy. That's what he is, and he's not going to be more than that in my opinion. Bo Horvat. Bo Horvat's a second line centerman. And it's tough. And I've said this, sometimes it's not the player's fault. It's the organization that puts a guy in the wrong position. I look at the Montreal Canadiens with Alex Galchenyuk many years ago. I don't blame him for his failure in Montreal because he was drafted as centerman and they didn't let him play center. He had to play the wing. He had to do other things and let him at least try the position he was drafted to play. And then, the media flushed him down the river. Dion Phaneuf was traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs. He was not a number one defenseman. And yet he's thrown in the position that he's not comfortable in doing to do it. Just because you're desperate and you don't have somebody doesn't mean you play a guy 25, 26 minutes a night just to prove a point. That's not how it works. You're going to lose a lot of games doing that. Taylor Hall was not the centerpiece of a winning organization. And Edmonton had to learn that the hard way, pardon the pun, and lose year after year. Tanner Pearson is a third, fourth line winger, and they signed him to $3.5 million a year to stay in Vancouver, and it makes no sense. They could have got that money off their books. I just look now. Travis Green is out. I think Green is a good coach, but unfortunately, this roster stinks. The players are starting to revolt against him, and it seemed like JT Miller was the only guy who had a heartbeat in there. So he's got to go. And now Bruce Boudreau's in for the rest of this year and next season. I don't expect this team to get much better. if Bruce can at least get them to compete night in, night out, that'll be a strong signal. And what the rest of the season really tells me is that, well, it's an audition period. It's, well, JT Miller was traded for a few years ago. Does he stick around? Is he a Vancouver Canuck long-term? It's going to be hard to move Ekman Larson. It's going to be hard to move Garland. I think those guys are there for the long haul. But is Bo Horvat? Yes, he's the captain of the team, but could you get assets for him at the trade deadline? Potentially. This team needs to go through a shift. It needs to go through a rebuild because it's not built to win. This defense core needs new bodies. It needs guys that can move the puck. It needs guys that are not slow as molasses. And just simple hockey structure things, just clean exit passes. You watch this team, how many times they get hemmed in their own zone, it would make you shake your head. You're just, what are you doing? I watched a few weeks ago, I watched the game against Columbus, and it was so hard to watch because you see a guy like Elias Pettersson who just can't give a shit. He gets a pass and then he just loses the puck and he gives up. That can't happen. Vasily Podkolzin, a rookie who's 20 years old, can't give a shit more than your superstar that makes $7 million a year. And if it is, then that guy needs to be sat down and talked to and say, okay, kid, smarten the hell up. And that could be the reason Bruce Boudreau is coming in, because Bruce Boudreau was hard on Alex Ovechkin. He was hard on Corey Perry. He was hard on young kids coming in. He did not give guys a free pass. Bruce and Ovi really battled because I think Bruce helped Ovi get to where he is now, where he's not a one-dimensional player. He's not the selfish Russian that you saw early in his career. It's not just about goals anymore. Alex Ovechkin needed that wake-up call to say, you know what? I don't want to just go down as a great goal scorer. I want to go down as a champion. I want to go down as a Stanley Cup winner. And although Bruce Boudreau wasn't there to see the fruits of that labor, I do think that pounding, that, hey, we keep losing to Pittsburgh year over year, I think that got to Alex. And when Barry Trotz came in, he said, you know what? Barry's a really good coach. I'm going to buy in here. And ultimately, they won the cup. And Bruce wasn't there. And Bruce got close in Anaheim. And he's never won a Stanley Cup. But do I expect him to be there long term? No, but I do expect him to at least set a foundation, set standards, set a culture for what is acceptable and what's not. And to me, the most important thing Bruce can do over the next year and change when he's there, and if he's there longer, great, it's work with Elias Pettersson. Elias Pettersson is the future of the Vancouver Canucks if they're going to be any good. If he is a flameout and they have to trade his contract, which is another mountain, and they have to get rid of him, this team could be Buffalo. And I'm not even kidding, because they don't have defense prospects that are jumping off the page. They have Demko, but Horvat's not a number one center. JT Miller's not. They don't have blue chip pieces to trade. It's Pettersson and Hughes. You need Hughes and Pettersson to be the answer. You look at Colorado, you look at Toronto, you look at Tampa Bay. Why are these teams succeeding? Stamkos hit, Braden Point hit. These top-notch prospects are producing. Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, Cale Makar. Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes need to be that foundation of the next wave of Vancouver Canuck successful teams. The Sedins did it forever with guys like Alec Burrows and Alex Edler and Marcus Naslund. Before them, they had years of success of at least getting to the playoffs, getting to that cup final in 2011, and being an organization that was respectable. They're a joke right now. And Vancouver Canucks have some of the most passionate fans in the NHL. You could argue a lot of them are, flown the coop. They fly off the handle too often. I wouldn't disagree with that sentiment, but at the same time, it's it's time for this team, whoever the next GM is, to really look at it and say, we have a lot of guys that aren't going to be here if we're going to win anything. And get those players off the team. If you have to eat some salary, you're not going to be any good for a long period of time. But for Bruce Boudreau, for the GM, for the next general manager, work to get Pettersson playing at his best. Continue to develop Quinn Hughes. And don't let Thatcher Demko's confidence go completely down the drain. And set some standards. Discipline is important. It can't just be take penalties every night and make stupid decisions. That can't be where this goes. And I'm not surprised to see Jim Benning go because, like I just outlined, he's made a lot of dumb decisions. He's made a lot of dumb decisions since being the GM. But another thing Vancouver can't do, and this is right to Francisco Aquilini, who's the owner of this club. You cannot, and I repeat this, cannot hire the Sedin twins as the GM or the co-GMs, whatever that would be. That would be the dumbest thing I've ever heard. They've worked in the organization for a cup of coffee. If you truly want this team to win, the Sedin twins are not the answer when it comes to the next GM. They've worked under Jim Benning for a hot second. And again, this sounds so easy. Don't do it. And you're probably like, no, they're not going to. If an organization is going to do this, it is Vancouver. Because Vancouver and Edmonton love their alumni. To a fault, in my opinion. Edmonton went through a decade of being a terrible team, picking number one, because they kept hiring alumni to do jobs that they weren't qualified for. Well, Vancouver, it's great to have the Sedins in the room. I'm not saying it's not a good thing to have their opinion, and they're great guys, and they'll be Canucks forever. But guess what? You need to hire a general manager, not guys that you can just put out on a podium. You can go shake hands and kiss babies. That's not how this works. And again, that might sound crazy, but it wouldn't it would be so Vancouver to hire the Sedin twins, who have no experience, who hardly know how this works, to be their general manager. And good luck to Vancouver. I think this is going to be a long process. They need to find a good GM. I mentioned a few last week that I think would be good hires. Mark Hunter comes to mind. Again, he's got very little NHL experience, but he's produced really good talent in the OHL. The London Knights are a great team. Sometimes it's not just about hiring guys that have done, GM work, because if they stink at it, well, why hire them? Like, I don't think Mark Bergevin is the right hire in Vancouver. That wouldn't be my first choice. Maybe Mark Hunter isn't my first choice either, but a name for a coach, and nobody's heard of this name before, but Chris Knoblock was the head coach of the Erie Otters for the tenure of Connor McDavid's career, and then after, when they had guys like Alex DeBrincat, and they were great teams. He's since moved to the AHL, and he's had a good run in the AHL. He's a young head coach. Bruce Boudreau's there right now. But I'm saying a year and a half later, Chris Knoblock could be ready for that jump. He could be ready to coach in the NHL. And he'd be a guy I'd look at, because we see, Sheldon Keefe got a job. He was an AHL head coach. Jeff Blashill got a job. He was an AHL head coach. Guys are going to start to get these positions. I think Chris Knoblock is going to be one of the first guys to get it. And maybe by the time Vancouver is looking to hire their next head coach, and if it's not going to be Bruce Boudreau, maybe he'll be scooped up by then. But remember the name Chris Knoblock, because I believe he will be an NHL head coach in the next 2 seasons. But good luck to Vancouver. After Saturday night, I watched a lot of that game between Pittsburgh and Van, It's no surprise to me that they did this. The fans have been wanting Jim Benning gone for a long time, and they ultimately get their wish late last night when they fired Travis Green and then Jim Benning later in the evening. Also today, the Philadelphia Flyers fired Alain Vigneault, who they hired in 2019. They signed to a 5-year contract worth $25 million. So he's got another 2 years to just sit there and collect money. But the Flyers have lost 8 in a row, including a 7-1 home loss last night to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And, a 7-1 loss is terrible all the time. But the Lightning did not have Nikita Kucherov. The Lightning did not have Braden Point. And Andrei Vasilevsky did not start on a back-to-back night. So it's been a terrible stretch. Obviously 8 straight losses, but I said that, Vigneault would get fired yesterday before Benning. Ultimately he didn't, because he got fired this morning. But for Philly, they fire Vigneault and Michel Therrien, who's the former head coach of Pittsburgh, Montreal. Really has done nothing that great in his career. But AV is a good coach. He made it to 2 Stanley Cup finals with 2 different organizations. He's had a good tenure, but Philly, it just never worked. And, I'm surprised that Calgary is doing as good as they were this year, because I equate Calgary a lot to Philadelphia in that they stick to their core all the time, and they're very reluctant to change, and they keep their star players who, in my opinion, can't get it done. Calgary to this point has been a surprise. They are top of the Pacific Division. They lost to Vegas last night, but they continue to find ways to win. Jacob Markstrom is the front runner right now for the Vezina Trophy. But Philly has done what I thought they would, and that's continue to lose. They made moves in the offseason. They got Rasmus Ristolainen. They acquired Ryan Ellis for Philip Myers. They traded Jakub Voracek for Cam Atkinson. But at the core of this team, you look, Claude Giroux is still there. Travis Konechny is still there. Ivan Provorov is still there. And that you can put more players on the edges. But when your best players have never got it done, have never won the biggest games, I look at Chuck Fletcher and say, what did you expect? It's not like Claude Giroux was a world beater last year. It was not like Carter Hart was was sent to the AHL last season. He was unplayable last season. He was one of the worst goaltenders in the NHL. And Philly is just a team that I look at and say, you think you know what you're doing, but you don't. And, Carter Hart lets in 5 goals on 15 shots yesterday. Again, it continues. He's got a .296 goals against, .911 save percentage. He looked like he had all the skill in the world, but he doesn't have it consistently. He just doesn't. Cam Atkinson, who they acquired, decent start, but again, he's not going to be a game changer. Sean Couturier, good player, not having the year defensively that you think he would. Claude Giroux is a good player. Borderline great player. You could say he was a fringe Olympian in 2014. But I look at Claude Giroux, and he's like Johnny Gaudreau or Sean Monahan. He cannot be your best player to win a cup. Point blank. And he's been their best player for too long. He's aging. He's not what he used to be, and he wasn't that great before. And again, the list can go on. I mean, Kevin Hayes, he's hurt all year. He went through tough times with his brother. So who the hell knows what was going on in his head? Travis Konechny is a guy with a ton of skill. He's got, he likes to chirp, but he takes really stupid penalties. And he turns the puck over at will. So he frustrates me. Scott Lawton's a 4th-line center who they're paying too much. Zach McEwen. Yeah, Zach's a good guy. He's from the island, but he's got 1 point in 20 games. I like Zach, but again, he's not going to be a game changer. Ivan Provorov. He's got a ton of skill, but at the same time, he's only got 8 points. That's not changing the world. 8 points when you're known for your offense. Ristolainen has 4. They need their defense to be more active. It's bad when Sanheim has 3 points and Ristolainen has 4. Sanheim is a defensive defenseman. Phil Myers was the offense on that line. Keith Yandle, I said this at the time. When Keith Yandle was bought out, Philly brought him in. This was going to be a really bad signing. And I'm the first to say plus minus is not everything, and it isn't. But Keith Yandle has been one of the worst just defending defensemen in the last decade in the NHL. He's a minus 13. A lot of the time he's on the ice for goals, it's his fault. You got James Van Riemsdyk, who's making $5 million a year, who just doesn't provide what he used to. And this lineup lacks offensive creativity. They lack game-changing players. And, Chuck Fletcher gets to fire the coach because it seems like every GM gets one free trigger. Well, Chuck Fletcher made a ton of moves in the offseason, and you still stink. So, to me, the next move is, well, Chuck, you got to go. Because they sit 7th in the Metro. They are looking at the 3rd place team, which would be the 3rd playoff spot. They are 13 points behind the Carolina Hurricanes. 13 points. They're not catching them. That's just point blank. You're not catching that team. You look at even Pittsburgh, they're 7 behind Pittsburgh for 4th. And right now they are 6 points out of a playoff spot. So it can happen for this team, but it's not going to be easy. And it's got to happen soon. And you look at it. I look at a guy like Carter Hart. You want to be an Olympic goaltender. You want to be a guy like he is. There's only so long that rope that you get and you say, well, this guy's a really highly touted prospect and he's got all the skill in the world. Well, yeah, he did. And that's where you start to get, Carter Hart did have all that talent. And then you look at his numbers, you look at him play, you look at him throw a pizza up the middle yesterday, right? Take the tape back of the net, and you say, what the hell happened? Where's that guy we saw at the World Juniors? And maybe Carter Hart's just another Justin Pogge. Just because you're touted as being the next big thing doesn't mean you're going to be. And I'm sure goalie huggers will tell me, well, the team sucks defensively. Well, you got to stop the effing puck. Vancouver sucked defensively, but in the bubble, Thatcher Demko just made saves. And so did Jacob Markstrom. And guess what? Edmonton wasn't great defensively last year. Mike Smith made saves, and the guy's 40 years old. Point blank and the period. AV gets fired today. But organizationally, Chuck Fletcher has not changed the antithesis of this team, the backbone of this team. And to me, Claude Giroux cannot be your best player. Cam Atkinson cannot be your second best forward. It just can't. Scott Lawton can't play 3rd line center. He's a 4th line center. I like him. He's got some jam. But putting pieces in the correct slot is so vital to teams. It has to be done, or you will fail for years. They've lost 8 in a row. They got Colorado tonight. I don't expect them to make the playoffs. I said that before the year. I didn't think Philly would make the playoffs. And I look at that Metropolitan Division. I give a ton of credit to the Pittsburgh Penguins because they haven't had Gino all year. Crosby's had COVID and injuries, and he hasn't played that well. Let's be honest here. Sorry, Sid, super fans. But, they've hung in there. They're, they sit currently with the second wild card spot right behind Detroit with a game in hand. So they're right in that mix. Pittsburgh's gone through way more injuries than Philly. Again, Ryan Ellis isn't playing, but they didn't have 2 of their top forwards for a month. They battled through. What happened, Philly? Tristan Jarry, he's playing damn well. Look at that defense core. Yeah, I love Brian Dumoulin, but he's a stud. But, John Marino, okay. Yeah, he's a brand name. Mike Matheson. Yeah, he's a real good defensive player. Marcus Pettersson. Yeah, nobody knows any. Chad Ruedel. All I know about him is he's bald. It just tells you some goalies can make saves and some guys just don't. And I think Carter Hart's a guy that I look at right now and say, you just don't make the big save. And a guy like Tristan Jarry, who's been criticized, is in a better position right now than Carter Hart to make the Olympic team, in my opinion, because he's playing good hockey this year. But we'll see what happens in Philly. It's not a good scene there right now for the Flyers. Now, that's two big firings, two big openings, but that was not all last night in the world of hockey. It's continued with, I can't believe this game between Toronto and Winnipeg, because Toronto is a skilled team. They are a puck-moving team. They're not so much finesse. They're not so much girth. And, Winnipeg has a little bit of everything. So I like about their team. They have a guy like Adam Lowry who can bring it offensively and, bring it the physicality. Their defense, Nate Schmidt, will give you some hockey, to throw a term in there. He's not afraid to mix it up. And I like the cut of their jib, but last night, second period, Winnipeg is just kicking ass. They're dominating the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto has a skill and a real liability on their team. Their skill is their power play. It's one of the best in the NHL. It's really hard to stop. You got Matthews, who just sits in that office with a wrist shot, the best wrist shot in the NHL. That's a dominant part of their game. It's what got them a point against Minnesota. Check. Their penalty kill stinks. Their penalty kill coverage, Manny Malhotra should teach the penalty kill, not the power play, because Malhotra actually played the penalty kill and he's actually pretty good at it. But I look at this and say, you see Winnipeg getting their opportunities. They could throw the puck from one side of the ice to the other, go cross ice, go through the middle, tape to tape passes. Toronto's defense, they didn't get no sticks in the lane. Cross seam passes were happening time after time. And, it's one thing when you allow a cross seam pass from a fourth liner. When it's Mark Scheifele going to Kyle Connor, you're in fucking trouble. And Toronto got in penalty problems, and they just can't kill off penalties. They can't. They stink at it. And I thought in that second period, they really let Joseph Wall to dry, because Winnipeg was dominating the pace of play. Toronto was chasing it, and ultimately it was 5-1. Kudos to them. Late in the second period, they get a power play. They score. They get another goal. Hellebuck, who hasn't been that great this season, lets in a really bad goal to Andre Kasha. So 5-3 going into the third period. I'm thinking, well, Toronto's in it. We've seen them come back from deficits. But that third period did not turn out to be offensive whatsoever. It was a bloodbath. And it started really with Neil Pionk. And Pionk is a defenseman I really like from Winnipeg. They acquired him for Jacob Trouba. I'd much rather have Pionk than Trouba, even though I think Trouba's been a good addition for New York. They add different things, but Pionk, I like the cut of his jib. But Rasmus Sandin's cutting through the middle. They're cutting into the zone. Pionk sticks his knee out, goes knee on Sandin. No call on the play. Play continues. You see Jason Spezza is irate. He retaliates, throws a knee on Pionk, and it just spirals. And let's start before we get to the Matthews getting thrown around like a guy, battling Brock Lesnar. Neil Pionk should have been tossed from this game. Neil Pionk should have been a 5-minute major. And, I'm not, contrary to what people say, I don't hate the Leafs. That should have been a 5-minute major. That might have changed the game. I heard Sheldon Keefe say that after the game. Very well could have. Toronto has one of the best power plays in the NHL, like I just said. And you never know what would have happened if they were given that opportunity to have a 5-minute power play. You don't know. So that's first. Neil Pionk will be suspended. In-person hearing, I think he'll get 2-3 games. He's not known to be a dirty player. So I think 2 to 3, maybe 2 to 4 games Pionk will get for that. If he gets 2, I'm okay with it. That's my range for that. That's not a 5-game suspension in my opinion, but he should have been tossed from the game. The Leafs were denied an opportunity to make it a game. And, that's on the officials. You missed a blatant one, and it was glaring, and it was wrong. You're out there to make the right calls. You're out there to officiate the game, and you just flat out didn't. So that was a miss. Now, Spezza retaliating. Spezza should be suspended as well, and Spezza should, he did get. I think he got tossed from the game. He should have, and he should be suspended as well, because 2 wrongs don't make a right. Now, I'm fine if somebody gets hit dirty and a guy comes in, but Spezza did the exact same thing to Pionk that he did to Sandin. Knee on knee is dirty. It's not as bad as, PK Sluban with the slew foot, what he's been doing every other game. That's about as greasy as it gets in the NHL, and he's pretty gutless if you ask me. But I look at Spezza is not known to be a dirty player either, but this was dirty. This was classless. And I would have preferred it if you just drop the gloves, go after Pionk. Don't throw a knee on knee. You hated what he just did to your guy. Well, go beat the tar out of him. Don't do the same thing. And to me, Spezza should get 2 games. 2 games. If he gets 1, I'm fine with it, but he should be suspended for this, because you can't throw a suspension on a guy for doing one thing, and then a guy basically does the exact same thing to the player, and then you don't give him anything. I get sticking up for your teammate. I have no problem with that. If Spezza hacked him over the leg and they drop the mitts, he gets 2 minutes for slashing. That's it. But he decided to do the same thing. And as a league, you have to set the precedent. And this is on the Department of Player Safety. It can't be, okay, we're a Wild Wild West, and then we're calling everything. It's on the officials to set a standard. And they were calling everything last night. They were calling too much, in my opinion. And they missed this. This Pionk one is glaring, but both guys should be suspended. And I think Winnipeg's next game is tomorrow, I believe, against Carolina. Toronto's next game is tomorrow against Columbus. They both should be out for those games. That's just my opinion, but they should be suspended at least for tomorrow's game. I expect both of them to be suspended for more than just yesterday's game. But that wasn't it. Yeah, that sparked some, fire, ice and fire. This might have taken place before the knee on knee, but I found this hysterical. And this was really my Canadian pride moment for me. Pierre-Luc Dubois, good Canadian boy, having a really good season. Bounced back for Winnipeg. Was as disappointing as you can get last year in the playoffs. And since the trade for Columbus last season, he was a tire fire. This year, he's been, you could make the argument he's a comeback player of the year. He looks like the Pierre-Luc Dubois they traded for. He looks like the guy that shut down Austin Matthews and co in the bubble when Columbus beat Toronto. But last night, I don't know what happened, just a couple of scrums, but Austin Matthews was getting thrown around by Pierre-Luc Dubois on that play, like Brock Lesnar sending guys to Suplex City. And that's a pro wrestling reference. I haven't watched pro wrestling in a very long time, but I did like Brock Lesnar, and he used to throw people around. And that looked like Pierre-Luc Dubois to me. Just threw him on the ground, pick him up. He did whatever he wanted with him. And it was a penalty for sure, roughing or holding or whatever you want to call it. But I found it really funny. I enjoyed it. Matthews, to his credit, he doesn't get involved in that stuff, and he doesn't have to. He's a superstar, but I probably would have gave him a slash or something back because he did look a little weak in that moment. But, it was just more of a funny thing for me. That was not a suspension or anything like that, but it was funny. But I think the teams meet again in March. Well, Sheldon Keefe wanted the next meeting to be spicy because the last couple of shifts, he threw the fourth line on with Clifford and Simmons, and Logan Stanley went after Simmons. And I love it. I think the next meeting, Hopefully it has some jam. It probably won't because it's a Leafs game. But last night's game, you can still have physicality, but knee on knee is never allowed. And I think both guys are going to learn the hard way that this is not tolerated. And, to contrast that, you see Connor McDavid also last night get ejected from the game for hitting Adrian Kempe from behind. And I don't think Connor McDavid's going to get suspended. And there's a reason for that because he's the best player in the league. There shouldn't be a double standard, but there is. But I would be fine if he was. And this is the reason. When guys get suspended, when guys get 5-minute majors for checking from behind and the guy turns his body while he's coming in, he shouldn't be. They shouldn't even get a 2-minute penalty because that guy caused that to happen. He completely turned his body so that he's facing the boards when you're coming at him full speed. How can you slow up? You can't. It's just physics. Well, last night, Adrian Kempe is facing the boards. Connor McDavid comes in, clearly frustrated because Edmonton's played a couple bad games in a row. They get beat down pretty bad by LA last night. He hits Kempe from behind. It was a dirty hit. And it was pretty simple to me. It was a dirty check. He didn't turn. He was from behind. And yes, he got a toss from the game, but it was late in the third period. I give him a 1-game suspension. I'm not usually a suspension guy. As you guys, I like physicality. But when you see dirty shit, it's dirty. I want to defend plays. I don't want to suspend guys. But when you do something blatantly dirty, you have to suspend it. Because this isn't Rob Ray, Ty Domi, Friday, Saturday night, home and home, Toronto, Buffalo. This isn't the Bob Probert era. This isn't Sean Avery and Matt Cook and guys ending careers on really dirty hits. Knee on knee, slew foot are some of the worst things you can do in the game. And eliminating it, setting a standard for the next players to not do it is exactly what Department of Player Safety is there to do. To say, we're going to prevent the next big injury. Okay, he did it on Rasmus Sandin. And Rasmus Sandin's a relative unknown. Yes, he was a first-round pick of the Toronto Maple Leafs, but he's a third-pair defenseman. He's not a brand name. He doesn't have any cachet around the league. So, this sounds cruel, but people aren't going to care because it's Rasmus Sandin. Sorry, Rasmus Sandin's family. That's just the way it is. It'd be the same thing if it was Cole Sillinger in Columbus or if it was Jake Bean in Columbus. Just you name a guy. If it was Chris Weidman in Montreal, the same kind of market, nobody cares because they're a third pair. You're a third line, fourth line player. The suspension, the drive that people say that can't happen anymore. It's not going to be as loud because people don't give a shit. So I'm intrigued to see what the suspension is because the Department of Player Safety are truly doing their job. It's eliminating this play and saying, we don't care that it's Rasmus Sandin. We don't care that it was on Neil Pionk. We are just going to stop this from happening to potentially Cale Makar down the road or potentially happening to Austin Matthews, player X down the road, who holds more weight, who's really important on a night-to-night basis for our product and for our league. So a lot happened in the NHL. And, Philly's back on the ice tonight, if you can believe it. They played tonight against the Colorado Avalanche. The Canucks played tonight against the Los Angeles Kings. Bruce Boudreau, first night on the bench. Mike Yeo was taking over for the Philadelphia Flyers. He was the assistant coach there for the last number of years. So 2 new coaches will be behind the bench tonight. Mike Yeo was a head coach in Minnesota prior to the stop in Philly. So interested to see what happens tonight in the world of hockey, but interesting things nonetheless. Now, yesterday was Sunday, and usually Mondays are all about the NFL for me, as you guys know. It's what I like, what I talk about. But my theme of the weekend was, you could say upsets, but that's not where I'm going to go. I'm going to go with predictable. And I think yesterday was a predictable game. I think it was very predictable that the Los Angeles Chargers that won a game after losing a game. That's what they've done all year. Week 1, they win. Week 2, they lose to the Cowboys. They win week 3, lose week 4. It's been a back and forth affair. They lose a terrible game at Denver. They come back and they go to Cincinnati. Justin Herbert outplays the number 1 overall pick, Joe Burrow. He makes the big plays he has to. Takes his deep shot to Mike Williams. Does a good job of not turning the ball over. And you saw that Cincy turned the ball over 4 times. Joe Mixon had a terrible fumble. And that's all she wrote. That's all that mattered yesterday. Burrow had 1 interception, but he was 26 for 35, 317, 3 touchdowns. It was a big, Keenan Allen caught 2 of them. It was a big day for the Chargers. It was also predictable for Cincinnati to have this letdown. I thought they could win the AFC North, and I still think they can. But what also happened to them? They're in a good position. They're 7-4. And like a few weeks ago, they win a big game against the Steelers. They lose to the Browns. Yesterday, they're riding high. They're feeling good. Joe Mixon's having a breakout season. They go in and play the Chargers, and they get shellacked. Joe Burrow did not have the day that you'd want him to have. He threw for 300 yards, but he had 2 interceptions. Joe Mixon fumbled twice. It was just a disastrous day for this team. It was predictable to me that, as funny as it sounds, that Kirk Cousins lost to the Detroit Lions. Yes, the Detroit Lions, who had not won a game in a calendar year. But it's predictable because it's Kirk Cousins. It's predictable because it's the Minnesota Vikings under Mike Zimmer. That's what this team does. They get in a position where you say, well, they should make the NFC wildcard. They're the best team out of that wildcard bunch, but yet they still struggle. Justin Jefferson catches 182 yards in a tub, but they fumbled the ball. They put themselves in a bad position, and their defense cannot make a stop on Jerry Goff on the last play of the game where he hits St. Brown for the walk-off touchdown. And good job. Congrats to the Lions, by the way, and Dan Campbell for finally getting their first win. But it's predictable. The Minnesota Vikings, you say this year, it's Mike Zimmer. This is it. But they lose, and now they're 5-7 outside the playoffs looking in. And it's predictable outcome. What's another predictable outcome yesterday? It's predictable that the San Francisco 49ers lose to Seattle. In my confidence pool, I had Seattle winning this game. It's predictable that Jimmy Garoppolo throws 2 interceptions, both of them very bad. And I talk about why San Francisco wins football games and why they don't. They win football games when they run the ball more than they pass the ball. Well, they ran the ball 25 times yesterday. They threw it 30. That cannot be the formula. It has to be run the ball more than you pass it. George Kittle had 9 for $181, nearly the same stat line as Jefferson in Minnesota, but yet they still lost the game. That doesn't matter. Russell Wilson had an interception, but they had a fake punt go for a touchdown. Adrian Peterson ran one in. Russell Wilson made the plays he had to, and San Francisco just turned the ball over and was stopped 3 times inside the Seattle 5 with 45 seconds left in the game. It's predictable that San Francisco, when they look like they've completely found it, flounder and fall out. It's predictable that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defeat the Atlanta Falcons. Tom Brady has never lost to the Atlanta Falcons in his career, including that Super Bowl epic collapse. But, Tampa is doing something the complete opposite of every team in this league. And I think there's a couple reasons for it. The teams that are winning most games have a great run-pass balance. Well, Tampa yesterday ran the ball 17 times. They threw it 51 times. On the opening drive, Tom Brady threw 8 passes on the opening drive for a touchdown. Leonard Fournette is used in the pass game. He had 7 catches for 48 yards and a touchdown. Rob Gronkowski is back to his old ways, caught 2 touchdowns yesterday. Chris Godwin had 15 catches for 143. But Tom Brady just can run that offense. He had a brutal pick 6, but otherwise he had a flawless game. 4 touchdown passes, 368 yards passing. And you look at Tom Brady, the guy I predicted before the season that he would win the MVP at 44 years old. Well, right now he's the front runner, and I don't even think it's even close. He leads the league in passing yards, just to Derek Carr. He leads the league in passing touchdowns, 4 clear of Matthew Stafford. He is doing, Jonathan Taylor's having a great year. He's got 1,348 yards rushing, 16 touchdowns rushing, 4 clear of James Conner and James Mixon. But a quarterback's going to win this award. And it's about narrative sometimes. But the fact that he can still do this where they rely so little on the run game is really, really impressive to me. And it's predictable they win the game. They didn't crush them. They only won by 13. But Tampa finds a way to win. They're 9-3. They're a game out of first in the NFC, tied with Green Bay for second. And they're putting themselves in a position to compete for that top spot in the NFC as we move down the stretch. Well, it's obviously predictable that the Indianapolis Colts crush the Houston Texans. But again, why did Indy win this game? And why are they going to win games down the stretch? Because they ran the football. Yesterday they ran it 38, 40, 43, 46, 48 times to 22 passes for Carson Wentz. Jonathan Taylor ran for 143 and 2 touchdowns. That is how this team wins football games. They use their running game because it's their strength. They are now 7-6 in the AFC. They will compete for a playoff spot down the stretch. Now, to me, this was a predictable outcome. Maybe not to others. I said yesterday on the podcast that I thought it just seemed like such poetic justice that the Pittsburgh Steelers would defeat the Baltimore Ravens yesterday. Pittsburgh Steelers were being written off by former players. Ryan Clark, the former safety of the Steelers, said, this team had no backbone. They had no fervor, and they were going down in a heap. But I just said to myself, Noah, the Steelers team. Mike Tomlin. He's got too much passion. He's got too much in his heart. And although Baltimore, beaten up, is still the better football team, but yet we go down the wire. Big Ben is not the same guy. He can't shake tacklers off anymore. He can't do what he used to. His arm isn't as good as it once was. But down the stretch, what does he do? Big play after big play to Deontay Johnson, to Chase Claypool, and then driving down the field with 1:50 left, he hits Deontay Johnson underneath. He dives past the pylon, and Deontay Johnson, after last year leading the NFL in drops, is quietly becoming one of the best receivers in the game. That puts the Steelers up by 7. But to Lamar's credit, he marches down the field, play after play, 3 passes to Sammy Watkins, 1 to Mark Andrews, and on a 3rd and goal, he finds Sammy Watkins for the touchdown. And this brings us to the play of the weekend, really. And it was 21 seconds left. Baltimore's ravaged on defense. We learned that the all-pro corner Marlon Humphrey has been lost for the season. That's 2 Pro Bowlers they've lost at corner this year. Marcus Peters was lost before the season started. So that Baltimore continues to be ravaged by injuries. But so it was, do we flip the coin, potentially get, Pittsburgh gets the ball back, our defense, we have no corners left, or do we go for the win right here? And John Harbaugh had a good weekend too at Michigan. He said, you know what? We're going to go for it. We're going to go for 2. We get 2. We win this game. And first of all, this is a gutsy call. Takes a lot of balls, but I think it was the right decision. I really think it was the right decision. And I live by the Herm Edwards philosophy. You play to win the game. You don't play to tie. You don't play to not lose. You play to win the game. And That's what John Harbaugh did. He said, I have Lamar Jackson. We got guys that can make plays. We just ran down the field in a 2-minute drill. We can do it right now. I'm not giving Big Ben the chance, who's a clutch quarterback. Well, you see the snap, and I called the play. I said, they're going. Mark Andrews was lined up behind the left tackle. And I said, he's going to move across. They're going to want to get the ball to Mark Andrews. And that's the play they ran. I said, that's obviously who they want. And sometimes defensive players just make plays. Yesterday, TJ Watt might have won himself the Defensive Player of the Year award. He had 3.5 sacks yesterday. He surpassed Myles Garrett for the league lead. He's a baller, just like his brother used to be a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year in JJ. Well, he didn't sack Lamar in the play, but he got in his face and affected the throw. He had to adjust his arm angle. The throw was a bit too far out. It hit Mark Andrews in the hand. He couldn't corral it. Ball hits the ground. Game over. Pittsburgh survives at home. And predictably, it's low scoring. It's the AFC North. It's a tough battle in the Steel City, but the Steelers find a way to win the game. And now we look ahead. Will the Steelers play on Thursday night against the Vikings? Two teams that desperately need a victory. But I don't think the Steelers are a very good team. But I also look at the Ravens. They are so ravaged by injuries. I don't think they can hold up. I don't think the Ravens can truly compete for a Super Bowl. I think the Patriots are better than the Ravens. I think the Bills are better than the Ravens. I think the Chiefs are better than the Ravens. I think the Bengals are better than the Ravens. They have too many injuries. They have too many flaws, and their defense is breaking down week after week. But kudos to the Steelers for staying alive. It was a get-right game for the Rams. They crushed the Jaguars to get some confidence. Gardner Minshew Jr. III has a huge game for the Eagles. Jalen Hurts couldn't play. 20 for 25, 242, 2 touchdowns. The guy, they run the football 40 times, and that's how Philly wins game. Dallas Goedert makes big plays, the tight end who's a stud. Zach Wilson actually didn't have a bad game, one of the better of his career so far, but it didn't matter. It was just a really good day for Philly. But we look ahead here. We got Bills, Patriots tonight. That should be a thriller. But if we look at the AFC, we got New England, Tennessee, Baltimore, and Kansas City all have 8-4 records. Those are all the division leaders. They all are 8-4. With a win tonight, Buffalo would be 8-4. They would be the top seed in the AFC after 13 weeks. That's how nip and tuck this is. Tennessee's coming off their bye. Kansas City beats Denver last night. Did not look impressive whatsoever. But, huge game this evening. Can New England go into Orchard Park and pull off an upset? We'll see. But all 8-4. Buffalo 7-4. The Chargers are 7-5 with the Bengals. Pittsburgh right behind them at 6-5-1. They'd be 7-5, tied with them if they didn't tie the Detroit Lions, which hurts them. Indy is 7-6, who I think, they got the Patriots in a couple weeks, but Indy is a good football team. Cleveland 6-6, Denver 6-6, Vegas 6-6, and Miami 6-7, who have won 5 straight heading into their bye week after starting the season 1-7. This AFC is wild. And every week, the AFC is going to be so fun because all these games mean so much. I mentioned the Thursday night game. Steelers head to Minnesota. Huge game for them. Huge game for Minnesota because in that NFC part of things, you got the LA Rams are 8-4. They have the 5th seed. Washington, who won yesterday in Vegas on a Brian Johnson, who just got signed off the street, game-winning field goal, and San Francisco are both 6-6. Philly, Minnesota, Carolina, Atlanta, and New Orleans are all 5-7. New Orleans and Atlanta stink. I think Carolina stinks. Minnesota possibly stinks. I think Philly is the team for me that will make the. I think San Francisco or Washington will fall out. I like Philly to make the playoffs. But there's intrigue over there. But when it comes to the AFC, looking ahead to this week, so I just mentioned the Steelers game. Ravens versus Browns. Browns are 6-6 coming off a bye. The Ravens are depleted. Can the Browns find some success? Can they get themselves back into playoff position? With a win, they would be 7-6. The Ravens would be 8-5. You're a game behind them. You could make it interesting. Raiders, Chiefs. Raiders are 6-6. Their offense fell apart yesterday. They lost to the Chiefs badly earlier in the year at home. The Chiefs offense only had one offensive touchdown last night. They had a pick 6 from Daniel Sorensen. But what do they have? What's their team right now? It does not look confident. It does not look like an offense that's clicking on all cylinders. But that's an interesting game. Titans are coming off a bye. They got the Jags. You got to win that game. Again, they're depleted roster. You need to find a way to go in there and win. Chargers play the Giants at home. Okay, you've had a letdown every week following a big win. It cannot come against the Giants. Probably Danny Dimes, but Mike Glennon started yesterday. I don't care who's starting at quarterback. You need to win that game. 49ers, Bengals. Massive game on both sides when it comes to wild card implications. We'll see where that goes. And we got Bills, Bucks, which, the Bills got a short week. They played the Patriots tonight. Then they go to Tampa Bay. That's a tough week for them. But it's just every week there's implications. There's things that are going to happen that we don't expect. What happens down the stretch with the Cardinals? They have the best record in football. But you look at the remaining schedule. They got the Rams this week. Not an easy game. Then they play Detroit. Well, they should win that game. Not saying much. They got the Colts on Christmas Day. They go to the Cowboys, and then they finish with the Seahawks. So they don't. There's so much to be decided. I think the one thing that I can say right now, definitively, that I feel confident about, is that Tom Brady's going to win the MVP award, and I think Jonathan Taylor will win Offensive Player of the Year, and Micah Parsons will be defensive Rookie of the Year, potentially Player of the Year. But I think TJ Watt has really put himself in that position. But right now, there's more teams that I don't trust than I do. Like going forward, I trust. If I had to put money on a team, I said this about 3 weeks ago, I have not changed. If I had to put money on a team to win the Super Bowl, it would be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It would not. I think Green Bay is a very good team, but I have more faith in Tom Brady in NFC Championship games in the big moments than I do Aaron Rodgers. That's, anybody disagrees with that, I think you need to get checked. I trust that the Dallas Cowboys are going to win the NFC East. I think the Cowboys will beat the Washington football team this week. And that'll basically put that division to bed. I think the Cowboys will win a really crappy division. Do I trust the Ravens to beat the depleted Browns? I don't, because a week off, Baker's not going to be 100% healthy, but they get Kareem Hunt back. They get Nick Chubb, and he's used as a complementary piece. Who knows where that goes? Maybe they can find some success. They use the play action. They use the bootlegs. They have Peoples-Jones open down the field. They use Jarvis Landry over the middle. Austin Hooper doesn't forget how to catch the football like he did a few weeks ago. That's something that could happen. Could the Jags beat the Titans next week? Absolutely, because the Titans have looked terrible for their bye. Broncos, Lions, that could be an upset. But again, there's so much to be decided. Football's so fun, and we can look at stats, we can look at the standings, and it's all important down the stretch, but it's just about finding your groove. This time of year, you got 5 games left. It's about finding your touch. It's about playing really good football heading into the postseason. Tampa Bay did that last year. They went to the Super Bowl. Kansas City's won a lot of games in a row, but they haven't looked good offensively. Can they find that in the next couple of weeks? That's pivotal, because I look at the AFC and say Kansas City should be the favorite because they're better than anybody, but their offense just isn't clicking. Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes don't have the connection that they once had right now. They need to run the ball more. Edward Helaire is a back that can get some all-purpose yards. So, can Kansas City find it? But we have many weeks to figure it out. We have a great game tonight in Orchard Park, New York. Tonight, a win for the New England Patriots would be such a statement. It puts, tomorrow's headlines on, the mothership and different shows would be Mac Jones is here. Mac Jones, the rookie quarterback, is legit. The Patriots are 9-4. They are top in the AFC. And they are the favorite to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. And I don't think that would be crazy to say. I don't think it's crazy to say right now. But beating your division rival, beating the team that won the division last year, going in on the road and, having a statement would be massive. And I think New England is a really good football team. I think they're one of the best teams in football. But I'll say right now, I expect the Buffalo Bills to win tonight. I think their defense is going to show up and play. We didn't see that a few weeks ago. But I think they're going to play tonight. We saw, again, they beat up on New Orleans. But if you're going to make a statement, Buffalo on offense, it's against this defense. Because what New England has struggled to do is run the football. Brian Daboll is stop the run. Brian Daboll, you don't have a great running attack, but if you want to have some confidence in it, if you want to show that you can do it, tonight is the night. Devin Singletary, Matt Breida, Josh Allen, run the football. Run the ball. Set the edge. Set the tone early in that first possession so that the play action can evolve, so that you can throw screen passes, so that your offense can start to bloom, so you can get the short passing game going to Cole Beasley. Setting up the screen game is integral to what happens the rest of the game. Getting Singletary, getting Breida, Josh Allen scrambling, getting the threat of the run will force New England to not play two deep safeties, to limit your passing game, where Josh Allen cannot use his biggest strength, and that would be his arm. And he's just, forced to go Patrick Mahomes last night, dinking and dunking over the field. But I'm interested to see, can they establish the run tonight? Will the Patriots, how do the Patriots, stop the run? And, can J.C. Jackson, can some of those big players, McCourty, can the big players on that New England defense force turnovers against this Buffalo offense tonight? But game of the year so far, Monday Night Football, nothing else I'd rather watch tonight. So, I'll be breaking it all down tomorrow. I'll be back as well talking Breaking Bad with Seamus tomorrow. We're doing a live show Wednesday night at 8:30 with Craig Eagles. We're going to talk about scouting, the NHL Central scouting process, lists, things of that nature. So get ready for that, and more coming this week on To The Point. But stay healthy, everybody. Stay safe. We'll talk then.